I did.
Okay, the planning board will come to order. This is a reminder that this is a remote meeting and operating under the instructions of the governor in response to the coronavirus shelter in place. Public is welcome to participate as usual. We have the minutes of April the 6th. I'll have a motion on that.
Move to accept.
Second.
When you're making a motion, could you give your name so that poor Krista can figure out who's doing what? Who made the motion?
I think I got it in Matt Elder.
Okay. And second was?
I think I did, Chris.
Okay, so when you're making a motion, give your name so that Krista's not trying to figure out who just spoke. Thank you. Chair's business. We have 2 meetings in May, one on the 4th and
We have to take a vote, roll call vote on every vote.
the vote has to be by individuals, and the clerk will do this. Go for it.
All right, I'll go ahead and call the roll alphabetically. Mr. Elder?
I made the motion to approve, so yes.
All right, Mr. Elder says yes, votes yes. Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Mr. Fay votes yes. Mr. Hahn?
Bill votes yes.
Mr. Ash votes yes. Mr. LaVenture votes yes. Mr. Russ?
I made the second. So yes.
Mr. Russ votes yes. Dr. Fenby?
Yes.
Dr. Fenby votes yes.
All right, so everybody votes yes, it passes.
Yes.
Whether you had make the motion or not, you still have to be taken in the poll according to legal. So these are the rules we're operating under. Chair's business, the 4th and the 18th. We're jumping a lot of things over to the 18th. Doesn't look like we're going to have much business for the 4th, and that's only next week. So what are people's feelings about canceling that meeting unless there's something real emergent happens?
As long as nothing big comes in, I don't see why not. If something pressing comes in, then we should try to help out anybody trying to move anything forward. But if it's all procedural stuff, I don't see any purpose in having it. But if somebody comes in with something urgent that has to be on the agenda and maybe put over for a couple weeks, that's one thing. But if nothing comes in, I don't see the pressing need to do a procedural meeting.
Other people? Phil?
Works for me up to a point of where we may need to be recalled in case something did come up. When would that be? If something did come up, when would we have to know by?
Thursday.
It's plenty of time.
Yeah, fair enough.
Phil?
Yes, I'd say postpone unless something comes up.
Chris?
I agree. I think postpone.
Sean?
Fine with me unless there's something that didn't need advertising that we can move up to the meeting next week to make that the second meeting easier.
All right.
Good point.
All right. Looks like we're in agreement. Thank you. We've got number 3 is A&R.
So the people that I have not heard join the meeting are our presenters. Do we have Mr. Scarron on the phone or on the meeting?
No.
What about for B? Anybody here for B?
Yeah.
Chris, is anybody here for B?
I do not hear, I spoke to both Mr. Scarron and, oh, here's someone. Who was this? Did I just hear someone join? Dan Bremser is in the lobby. Dan, are you there?
I am, thank you.
Okay. That's item 3B. I don't have Mr. Scarron here at this point. Let me see if I can reach him
All right.
Do we need a motion to move it down so we can hear
Yeah.
3B in the meantime?
Okay, I'll accept that motion. That motion is made by
Matt?
Matt. Okay, second? By,
James.
okay. And then we have to have a roll call.
Mr. Elder.
Yay.
Mr. Elder votes yay. Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Mr. Fay votes yes. Mr. Hodges.
Unknown
Mr.
participant
Hodge
is now
votes yes.
joining.
Mr. Hodges votes yes. Nice jacket. Mr. LaVenture votes yes. Mr. Russ.
Yeah.
Mr. Russ votes
They
yes.
have
Dr.
the
Fen-
participant here. Mrs. Karen, are you there?
And Dr. Fenby.
Yes,
They were just moved down anyway, so we'll just do 3B.
Okay. Okay, one moment. Are you seeing my A&R?
no,
No. There it is.
okay, good.
Dan, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes,
I can.
You can or you can't? I'm sorry.
I can. Everyone can hear Mr. Bremser from Hancock Engineering?
Yep.
Mhm.
Good evening, board members. My name is Dan Bremser from Hancock Survey Associates. The plan before you is an A&R plan on Second Road in Marlborough. The applicant is the abutter to the west, and they're proposing to purchase a 25-foot strip of land from the prop. Yep. In fact, thank you very much for the cursor. And as you can see, the zoning table, we've shown the minimum required frontage, site coverage, and side yard setbacks are met with the 25-foot strip coming out of the lot. And we have the note on there that the lot is not a separate buildable lot and only to be used in conjunction with abutting property, which is note number 1. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does the board have any questions? Any questions from anybody? We have a letter from engineering. Do you, clerk,
Dear
want to?
Dear Dr. Fenby, our office has reviewed the following plan, which creates a 25-foot non-buildable strip of land from an existing parcel with excess area and frontage for residents A3 zone in which the land is located. The subject property contains 28,029 plus or minus square feet, is a total of 150 feet of frontage along Second Road, a public way. There is an existing single-family house on this property. The purpose of this plan is to subdivide the existing property, creating a 25-foot wide strip of land and a lot which will contain the existing single-family house. Parcel A containing 4,669 plus or minus square feet with a total of 25 feet of frontage on Second Road. Lot 2 containing 23,350 plus or minus square feet with a total of 125 feet of frontage on Second Road. Lot 2, which currently has a single family house on it, has the required area and the required frontage for property in a residence A3 zone, has present adequate access on Second Road, and also meets the lot shape requirement. The front, rear, and right side setbacks will not change. The left side yard setback will change to 56.6 plus or minus feet for the house and 12.8 plus or minus for an existing shed, both well within the zoning requirements for residence A3 zoning. Parcel A does not meet the requirements for area, frontage, or lot shape and has been correctly identified on the plan as not a separate buildable lot, and further notes that it is only to be used with adjacent property owned by Diane McLeod and Reginald Ashford. Should you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, Timothy Collins, Assistant City Engineer.
I'll have a motion to accept and file and to endorse the plan.
So moved.
Who was that?
George.
Motion? Okay,
Matt
George made the motion.
seconds it.
Okay. We'll have to have a roll call vote.
Mr. Elder.
Yay.
Mr. Elder votes yay. Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Mr. Fay votes yes. Mr. Hodges.
Yes.
Mr. Hodges votes yes. Mr. LaVenture votes yes. Mr. Rust.
Yes.
Mr. Rust votes yes. Dr. Fenby.
Yes.
Dr. Fenby votes yes.
Okay, it passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you, members of the board. And thank you for going to this effort to do the meetings like this. We really appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome. This is what
Take
we're
care.
all about.
Be safe.
You too. Okay, has Scarron showed up yet?
He said he was joining. He sent me a message. Mr. Scarron, are you joining the meeting?
Are people willing to consider this without Mr. Scarron's presence, since he's obviously technologically challenged?
Do we want to do the public hearings first and then see if he joins us?
We can do that.
There's never actually technically a motion to where we were going to move it to, so it's just moved down. So
Okay, we're just going to assume that we're moving it down and continuing.
Yeah.
All right. We have a continuing the public hearing. This is reopening the public meeting in accordance with Chapter 40A, Section 6 of the Mass General Laws. And this is the Gutierrez Company, Commonwealth Heights. And we are opening this with no testimony from the public and continuing it until May 18th at 7 p.m. If there is no objection from any board member. Are there any objections?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, hearing none, that will be the case.
Excuse me, Mr. Scarron, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right. Would you like to make your presentation to us now?
Okay, well, we're here to present the A&R for separation of our existing property that's, we're doing the condo development, and we need to get this A&R done so that we can move forward. So I'm here to present it and answer any questions that you might have.
Let's have the presentation.
Oh, okay. I didn't know I was supposed to be doing I was told I just had to introduce it and be here to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Well, it's been before us before, and it wasn't right, and it got turned back to you. So now we want to know what you changed from when you first.
Okay, so I guess what we've changed is the barn was encroaching over the property line, so we tore down the barn and removed the pool to make sure all the setbacks are maintained at this point. So now, since the last time that there was an encroachment, we got rid of the encroachment and are representing.
Okay, so the lines are still the same, but the encroachment is gone.
Yes, all the encroachments are gone.
Okay. Do you have any questions from the board members?
No.
Chris, this obviously answers the question you had this afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, maybe the only thing is, so this plan that's before it represents all the existing conditions that are current on the site right now?
Actually, yeah, it pretty much, it does. The existing contractor building, the one on towards the top that says building is still standing, but ideally we do have a permit to tear that down. So that's probably going to be happening within the next week. But as of right now, what you see is what's there.
Great.
All right, we have a letter from engineering.
Dear Dr. Fenby, our office has reviewed the following plans proposed to create two buildable lots. The subject property contains 1.94 acres, 84,506.4 square feet, and has a total of 310.6 feet of frontage along Ash Street, a public way. There is an existing single-family historic house on the property and a large storage building located on the property. Large portion of the property where the storage building is located has been used as a contractor's yard. The proponent has recently obtained from the City Council a special permit, Council Order 19-1007809C, recorded at the South Middlesex Registry of Deeds as Book 74024, page 157, to develop the property with a pre-existing and non-conforming use to construct an 11-unit residential townhouse development with 5 buildings and to convert the historic one-family house to a 2-family dwelling. The development, known as Trailside Terrace, and has been recently received approval from the Site Plan Review Committee. Purpose of this plan is to subdivide the existing 1.94 acre property with a total of 310.6 feet of frontage in 2 lots. Lot 1 containing 67,523 square feet, 1.55 acres, with a total of 192.61 feet of frontage on Ash Street. Lot 2 containing 16,857 square feet, 0.39 acres, with a total of 117.99 feet of frontage on Ash Street. As per the special permit referenced above, Lot 1 is to be developed as an 11-unit residential townhouse project, and the single-family house on Lot 2 will be converted to a 2-family dwelling. The large storage building will be raised as part of the 11-unit townhouse project. Lot 2, which currently has a single-family house on it, has the required area and the required frontage for property in a Residence A3 zone, has present adequate access on Ash Street, and also meets the lot shape requirement. The proposed 2-family conversion of this dwelling will not change the front, rear, or side setbacks for the proposed lot. Lot 1, proposed with an 11-unit townhouse development and approved by the Site Plan Review Committee, has the required area and the required frontage for property in a Residence A3 zone, meets the required front, rear, and side yard setbacks, has present adequate access on Ash Street, and also meets the lot shape requirement. Should you have any questions regarding the above, please don't hesitate to contact Tim and Collins, Assistant City Engineer.
I'll have a motion to accept and file the letter and to endorse the plan so that Trailside Terrace can proceed.
So moved.
Second by Matt Elder.
Second.
All those in favor, according to the poll being taken by the clerk.
Mr. Elder.
Yay.
Mr. Elder votes yea. Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Mr. Fay votes yes. Mr. Hodge?
Yes.
Mr. Hodge votes yes. Mr. LaVenture votes yes. Mr. Russ?
Yes.
Mr. Russ votes yes. Dr. Fenby?
Yes.
Dr. Fenby votes yes.
All right, so it passes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
On to 4B. This is a proposed zoning amendment, and we will open the meeting. In accordance with Chapter 48, Section 6 of the Mass General Laws, I hereby declare this public meeting open. The clerk will read the notice of the public hearing.
Notice is hereby given. The Planning Board of City of Marlborough will hold a remote public hearing on Monday, 27 April at 7 p.m. to amend Chapter 650, Section 5, 17, and 18 of the Zoning Code of the City of Marlborough, and to amend the zoning map established by Section 650, Chapter 8. This public hearing will be open with no testimony from the public being heard and continued until May 18th, 2020 at 7 p.m.
All right, if there is no objection, this meeting will be closed and continued until May 18th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Do I hear any objection? Hearing no objection, that will be the case. Thank you very much. Next, we have public hearing. This is a continued public hearing, zoning amendment livestock farm. In accordance with Chapter 48, Section 6 of Mass General Law, this meeting is continued and open. And let's have a discussion of what we want to do with this. Do I have anybody who'd like to speak up?
I can start maybe. Overall, I think I consider myself not in favor of what this is currently. Can it be changed? So I would be in favor, yes, but I think we have to look at little more detail for zoning, and then also bring in the Board of Health component. We did receive the Board of Health regulations, and they're very thin, in my opinion, as far as having any information as far as what's allowed, what's not allowed. So from a zoning standpoint, I'd like to have, if the city council or who actually looks into this, is not necessarily allowing this use in the RB and RC, and then limiting the A3 zones to 6 and fewer chickens. Just the high density areas, I don't think are necessarily places we want to have this use. I'd also like to consider having a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet. I know all the remaining zones have larger lots, but some may be non-conforming lots from earlier in the day before the zoning regs were written. The language, I think language needs to be included regarding the Board of Health being the permitting authority. Right now, it makes no mention of that in what's written. Also, there's a section that makes note of the slaughtering of chickens or hens for non-personal use is prohibited. I think we want to include the sale of eggs to be prohibited. Coops, I think from a zoning standpoint, should fall under the requirements of accessory structures, meaning that they should meet all the zoning requirements for those. Also maybe a little bit more restrictive in the sense that they have to be 25 feet away from any inhabited dwelling. And then also a note about keeping chickens in the front yard should be prohibited, so we don't have coops in front yards and things like that. And then from the board, so those are the zoning requirement pieces that I think should be considered. Then there's the Board of Health piece where they need to, or maybe the zoning makes reference to this, but to wetlands and conservation requirements. Also, there's state and federal requirements that should be referenced. The run locations and setbacks from property lines. Also, one that I missed for the zoning is they'll only be allowed on single family properties that are owner occupied. And then from the Board of Health standpoint, there's one last one is they need to make some kind of notes about rodent and pest and control and how to minimize those type of headaches.
Well, you've given us a lot of thought. Thank you very much, Chris. Anybody else would like to make comments on this?
I wanted to ask Mr. Russ a question, and then I have some things I wanted to add. What was your minimum lot size, Chris?
I had 8,000 square feet. Looking at the zoning regs, that one popped up as I think one of the smaller lot requirements in the city. That's where it came up. I'm open to any size that you want to suggest. I just sort of picked one.
That sounds fine to me. It just seems to me that we're kind of putting the cart before the horse here, that we're talking about a zoning change before the Board of Health regulations are in place to adequately address chickens in backyards. And I'm thinking about we don't really know, the Board of Health really hasn't weighed in on what the public health risks are to keeping chickens in the residential setting. And, you know, if I think about my property, what if the neighbors to the right and left and behind me want to keep chickens? I'm surrounded by chickens. And there's no regulations. What was that?
Your dog would love it.
He would love it. I don't see any requirements for annual inspections.
Right.
There are very thin regulations on disposal of manure. We still have the risk of increased predator prevalence with the increased food source. Chris dealt with the location of the structures that would house the chickens. I think that I would like to request that the city council delay action until the Board of Health has an opportunity to come up with comprehensive regulations and the Conservation Commissioner weighs in on the predator issue and animal control as well. I just think it's not, the more we dug into this, the more it became clear that this wasn't the right time to introduce more potential public health risks to our residents.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this issue?
Concur.
Anybody else? Well, perhaps you'd like to make a motion, either Chris or Sean. And then whoever makes the motion could perhaps help Krista with forming it so that it incorporates some of the things that both of you have said. We don't want to miss any of that.
I think I have all of the points that Chris raised, which is we don't want them in RB or RC zones. You want to limit to 6 chickens in which zone, Chris?
A3.
A3.
A3. Minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet. Board of Health is the annual permitting authority. Sale of eggs prohibited. The chicken coops to fall under the accessory structures with a minimum 25 feet from any dwelling. No chickens in the front yard. Only allowed for owner-occupied single-family residences. And then there's some additional language that I had about the current Board of Health regulations not adequately addressing the potential public health risks with keeping chickens in residential settings, Salmonella, Campylobacter. They don't provide for annual inspections, don't address this disposal of manure adequately. With the ordinance in general, there's a risk of increased predator prevalence and an increase with the increased food source. And we also have to consider the potential impact to residents if multiple abutters chose to keep chickens. And I think it's appropriate, given all of those factors, to ask the City Council to delay action until the Board of Health, working with Conservation and Animal Control, have a chance to work collaboratively to enact appropriate and thorough regulations.
That's a motion.
That would be a motion.
Do I have a second?
I would second that, Chris.
All right. We'll now take a poll.
All right. Mr. Elder.
Muted. I was muted. Yay.
Mr. Elder votes yay. Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Mr. Fay votes yes. Mr. Hodge.
Yes.
Mr. Hodge votes yes. Mr. LaVenture votes yes. Mr. Russ.
Yes.
Mr. Russ votes yes. Dr. Fenby.
Yes.
Dr. Fenby votes yes.
All right, it passes. Thank you very much. A lot of work went into that, and I appreciate everybody giving some thought to it. All right, next up is correspondence regarding the McGee Farm. And you said you had some pictures too, Krista?
Yes, maybe, let me share this again. Second, hang on. Are you seeing the,
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Scorpia, are you available to?
I am.
Okay.
Okay.
So I just, so the board is being asked to comment on a special permit application for this proposed project at the McGee Farm. The special permit that they require has to do with the floodplain and wetlands overlay district and the fact that they're filling some of the floodplain in this proposal. So I just took their site plan, one of their site plan sheets, and I highlighted in blue the limits of the 100-year floodplain that's associated with Broadmeadow Brook. So Broadmeadow Brook flows from west to east through the site, to the south of what they want to develop. And what's in blue is the limits of the 100-year floodplain. And then in pink are locations on their project where they propose to put fill within the floodplain. And the minimum performance standard when someone proposes to fill in the floodplain is that you provide at least that amount of compensatory area. So when you put fill in the floodplain, that flood water has to go somewhere. And your minimum performance standard is to make sure you provide somewhere in the vicinity of your filling an area that can compensate for that filling. And they have provided some calculations. I think the board got a copy of them that I've looked at that I think adequately demonstrate at least that minimum standard of providing some compensatory storage. This area has some complex drainage issues with it. There's a butters to the west and to the south that have drainage problems. We know there's flooding issues. There's at least three culverts on or at the limits of the property that so we're still looking at the details of the proposal and the stormwater calculations to see how that all may impact the flooding situation. And the Conservation Commission is doing the same right now. So from an engineering standpoint, they said they sort of met the minimum threshold of providing the compensatory area required in the ordinance. But we're still, at engineering, we're still looking at the details of the proposal. And I know that the Conservation Commission is still doing the same. So at engineering, we plan to provide a memo for the ZBA and for conservation before they are going to act on this. And I'm happy to provide that to the board as well. We have that ready.
That makes sense to me before we take any decision.
Yeah.
I can answer any questions based on what I've looked at so far, if you have any.
So one thing I know, some neighbors of mine on Helen Drive that abut the stream do have concerns about excessive flow of water through that area because they already have issues with wet basements and things like that right now. So we just want to be sensitive towards what we're sending downstream.
Yeah.
Right. So the sort of the last place, the last culvert is the one that goes under the sewer easement. That's a very large culvert. It would make sense at a minimum that they do an analysis at that point to make sure, at least they're not affecting anything downstream of their project. So that's one thing we want to make sure of. The other two culverts are go under the old track that's on the property. And there's some constraints there that affect the flooding that we need to look at also.
Tom, this is not Maury Brook. This is not the one that runs along Phelps Street. This is a different brook.
Correct. This is Broadmeadow. I'm looking at the GIS now too as we speak to see where it.
Does that feed into Maury Brook?
It looks like it does. It looks like they both.
Farm Road further down.
Yeah, they both are tributaries to the reservoir, so they don't join up.
They don't join up. Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Can you have that ready for the next meeting?
I have more of an inquiry. This is sort of from hearsay. Are they looking to develop towards Farm Road? There's another large wetland that right now this one doesn't affect, but heard they were trying to put in some sort of school over there, and there was concern they were going to fill that entire wetland area. Is that more rumor, or is that something that's?
I'm not aware of this project expanding. You mentioned a school, so there's the property across from the airport. There's a sort of a school that's proposed for that property. It's on the other side of the wetland, and it doesn't. There's no wetland impacts for that project to any extent like this one has.
Okay, good.
Is that the vacant land directly across the street from the airport, Tom?
Yes.
All right. Can you have this analysis done by the next meeting? Assuming it's the 20th.
Yes, I plan to have it for the next conservation meeting, which I believe happens before your next meeting. So yes.
Okay, good.
So when we say next meeting, do we mean the 4th or the one after?
The one after.
Okay.
That's May 18th.
Yes. Any more questions or comments about this at this point? Okay, hearing none, we'll close that. Thank you very much for your help on this.
Yep.
Finally, we have some unfinished business, draft policy discussion. We probably have documents that got sent to us that we should accept and file.
No.
All right, I'll have a motion to accept and file with documentation.
So moved, Matt.
Second.
Just a second.
Chris Russell, second.
All right, and do you want to read the roll?
Mr. Elder.
Yay.
Mr. Elder votes yay. Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Mr. Fay votes yes. Mr. Hodge.
Yes.
Mr. Hodge votes yes. Mr. LaVenture votes yes. Mr. Russ.
Yes.
Mr. Russ votes yes. Dr. Fenby.
Yes.
Dr. Fenby votes yes.
All right, everything's accepted and filed. Finally, number 10, draft policy discussion regarding zoning and variance requests. And we received a draft copy from Sean, and perhaps you'd like to talk to us about it.
I was actually just looking for it. Let me bring it up on my other computer here. Hang on 1 second.
It's in your hard copy also.
It was in the hard copy?
Yep.
I didn't get, there we go. Thank you.
Last page.
All right. So I think we have, really this is in 2 parts. First is requests for variances from the sign ordinance, and it's intended to put people on notice that if your property is otherwise not in compliance, you are the gas station with the illegal A-frame signs, balloons, and banners. You have signs attached to fences, trees, and telephone poles that you're not going to get your variance for your additional signage on the building. So that's, or if the property is otherwise not in compliance, you have a use of the property that's not consistent with the table of uses. So the first is for the sign ordinance, and I think that's pretty straightforward because that's completely within our control. The second part is requests for rezoning related to specific properties. And I think the same standards should apply, and that is if there are illegal uses on the property that would not be brought into compliance with the zoning change, if the property was grossly non-compliant with the sign ordinance or had other violations, that we would send a negative recommendation to City Council, request that they delay action on the matter until the property was brought into compliance. Because we don't want to, we expect business owners in the city and property owners to follow all applicable rules and regulations. And it is contrary to what we expect of our residents to provide relief and reward people who don't comply willingly. So that's the crux of the policy. I think really it comes down to how do we determine when a property is in compliance? I think it's incumbent upon us to go look at the property and see what we see, and then ask code enforcement for a letter regarding what the current violations are and whether there are any ongoing enforcement actions involved in the property.
Okay, thank you. Let's kind of just go around and have everybody give their take on it. And let's start with Phil. You haven't said much tonight, so what's your view on this?
I think this is a pretty reasonable position to take. And taking it and publishing it would put everyone on notice.
Okay. And Matt?
So I certainly agree with everything that Sean said. My only, am I on right now? Yes. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, my dog's barking, so I'm constantly muting. So my only not concern, but we are going to have very many situations where someone's been out of compliance for years. They've had up tons of signs and all sorts of crazy stuff, and they know they want to come before us. And a week later, a week before they meet with us, the weekend before they meet with us, they clear it up, and that meeting, they're all of a sudden in compliance. So I guess there is going to be a little bit of give and take if there's some place that's been out of compliance for 6 years to come before us and say, no, we're okay, it's all set. So that's one of my concerns, is that, a lot of times people come before us looking to change property or do something with a property, and then magically the week before it gets cleaned up and trash removed and brush taken away. And I think that would be kind of similar here, which is good because it would clean up the property, bring them in compliance. But, I do think that's going to happen where people are going to do it just the weekend before. Which is better than nothing.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a good point. Let's see, who haven't we heard? Chris?
I think this is very reasonable. The one question I have is, are they coming before us and we're asking them or asking the building official to go out and do a zoning review, or are they doing this review of compliance prior to us having any involvement or a hearing being set?
Sean, how did you see that working?
So I think with a sign variance request, we control that process, and we can tell them when we can either have it part of our application process, or we can tell them, when they apply, that this is what we're asking for. If it's a zoning request where we're providing guidance to the city council, I think we can I think we have enough time to send out a request to inspectional services to get a letter back to us.
Right. That's my one concern, is that we can go out and see the signs and things that are pretty simple, but if it's coming from the building department or whoever is enforcing these, it's more meaningful for them, and also keeps us from not necessarily overstepping, but making a mistake and saying, oh, we don't think this is in compliance when it actually is in compliance.
I think sometimes it's going to be pretty obvious. Like the other day, I was coming from Hannaford's, and I was coming back towards downtown, and I look up on the left, and there's a flea and tick place up on the hill, and they have a huge sign attached to their fence. So I'm guessing that, I'm,
I think the signs are the simple one. It's the zoning, when we're changing the zoning, pieces around.
I think it's a question of, is it fair to the residents that follow the rules to grant someone relief if they're willingly violating the rules? And I don't think that it is. You know, and I can tell you right now that if I decided to put on the fence that goes along my driveway to my office a banner that said "Will Specials," it would take Pam about 45 seconds when she's walking her dog past my office to write me a ticket, and she'd be 100% justified in doing it. But the point is that I would never do anything like that because I know it's against the rules. I just expect everyone to play along with the same rules. That's all.
Okay.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
George, you got an opinion on this?
Yeah, just perhaps a couple of thoughts. One, I'd like to thank Mr. Fay for taking the time to put this together. I think it makes really good sense. I think it helps us from having to deal with things that shouldn't come before the board, and I think it also helps people that are trying to come before the board not to come here and basically be spanked, and they know what they're looking for in advance. I'm suspecting that you're thinking that a document like this or some verbiage like this will either be published as part of the planning board rules and procedures and up on the city website so that it's available for, as you had suggested earlier, you know, part of the review process, so they'll know about it in advance. I think it was Mr. Elder that had a good point, and that is what happens if someone cleans up their property, comes before us, because it comes into compliance, requests the variance, receives the variance, and then they go back to being bad citizens again. Is there any way to make a variance contingent upon the continuing good citizenshipness and following the rules and in the event that they go back, God forbid, they relapse back to their old ways, that the variance may no longer be valid. I throw that out there as a thought.
We did that, George, with the gas station across from Funky Murphy's.
Okay.
You know, we made their variance contingent upon them not using A-frame signs. And I also think this should go once we have the final version of the policy, if it's today or if it's at the next meeting. I think we should send it as a separate communication to City Council so they know what our position is on zoning requests and the guidance that they're asking us to provide. I think it can go on our website the same way that the Guide to Abutters did years ago, when we were trying to explain to people how they should conduct themselves in public hearings, which didn't really work. And I also think on the sign variance requests, we can make it part of the application.
Yeah, I like that.
Eventually. I think that's probably a longer term project.
All right, so it seems that we have general consensus that we'd like to go in this direction.
Sorry, can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
Just speaking to Mr. Elder's point, I think it would really be up to us if we noticed that someone cleaned up the property just for the purpose of getting what they wanted and then reverted back to their old ways. I think that is establishing a willful and deliberate violation of city ordinances, and I think it's something that we should absolutely refer to code enforcement.
All right, so how do we wish to proceed? Do we want to say this is pretty much our final document? Do we want to pass it through legal and make sure they're on board with it? Do we want to buff it up and send it again in future point to the city council? What are people's druthers?
I think passing it to legal just for another glance would help us. Nothing sticks out to me that would be, any points that they would raise, but I think sending it off to legal just for final view before we approve it, hopefully the next meeting would make the most sense. But it's up to everybody else, but I wouldn't mind sending it to legal real quick just for their humble opinion.
Okay,
Makes sense.
all right. So is that a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion to refer to legal. Matt.
Second?
And I just want to make sure, in speaking with him about prior things we referred to, we just want to be clear about what it is that we're expecting him to come back with on when we refer it to him.
Okay,
I just want to make sure that he agrees that this is something that we could, it doesn't violate any First Amendment rights or any issues with anything in city code. So, I just want him to point out anything glaring that he thinks needs to be changed. It doesn't have to be put in proper legal form or anything like that. But it's more so, that.
does that make sense to you, Sean?
Yep. I guess we're looking for him to tell us whether we are violating our own rules or any other regulations in the city by expecting people to comply with the Marlborough regulations as a whole.
Exactly.
Well, seriously, but the question there may be, just because you're non-compliant, does that abrogate your right to apply for a variance? So I could see that question kind of coming up.
But we're not saying they can't apply. We're just saying that we're not going to act favorably if they do apply and they're serial violators.
Oh, it's subtle, very subtle, Sean. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
All right. So do I have a second on this motion as it stands?
I'll second. George.
Okay.
This
And
is a
so,
motion to refer to legal.
yes.
Yes.
And
For the reasons stipulated, right?
yes, I stipulated.
For the
You want-
reasons stipulated.
You want to go through the roll call?
Mr. Elder. Mr. Elder.
Okay.
Mr. Elder.
Guess he's taking care of the dog.
Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Mr. Fay votes yes. Mr. Hodge.
Yes.
Mr. Hodge votes yes. Mr. LaVenture votes yes. Mr. Russ.
Yes.
Mr. Russ votes yes. Mr. Elder. Mr. Elder. Dr. Fenby.
Yes.
Dr. Fenby votes yes.
Okay.
Mr. Elder. Nope, we might have lost him.
Yeah. All right. So, is there any other business that we have to attend to right now? Anything else people want to discuss? No? Well, it's usually Mr. Elder's role to move that the meeting be closed, so somebody else is going to have to do that.
I'll make the motion, Chris, to adjourn.
A second.
I'll second. That's Sean.
There you
Okay.
go.
And we have to now go through the roll call again.
Mr. Elder. Mr. Fay.
Yes.
Mr. Fay votes yes. Mr. Hodge.
Yes.
Mr. Hodge votes yes. Mr. LaVenture votes yes. Mr. Rust.
Yes.
Mr. Rust votes yes. Mr. Elder. Dr.
Yeah,
Fenby.
he's already
Yes.
adjourned.
Dr. Fenby votes yes.
And the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Great job. Really appreciate it.
Be safe. Stay healthy.
Good seeing you all.